I never expected a Tuesday evening to become the kind of night that would scrape something raw inside me, the kind of night that told me exactly where I stood in the world. All I wanted was a few basic groceries, a carton of eggs, a bag of rice, 2 cans of tomato soup because they were on sale, and a bottle of store-brand cold medicine for my mother. Nothing special, nothing extravagant, just the kind of things people buy when they are trying to stretch every penny to make it to the end of the week. The checkout line was long, the kind that forms at the end of the month when everyone gets off work at the same time. People shifted impatiently, tapping their cards on the counter or flipping their keys around their fingers. I kept my head down and focused on the total flashing on the small screen. $34.97. More than I hoped, but manageable. I slid my EBT card in and waited for the familiar beep. Instead, the machine flashed red. Payment declined. I tried again. Declined. The cashier, a teenager who looked exhausted himself, glanced at me but said nothing. Someone behind me sighed loudly. Another person muttered something I could not fully catch except the part that stung. Figures. She looks exactly like the type. Heat flooded my face. I felt my ears burning. I tried again, more desperate this time, my fingers trembling. The machine chirped the same denial. The cashier cleared his throat and looked at the growing line. "Ma'am, you will need to step aside. Maybe call the number on your card." My throat tightened. I whispered that it must be a mistake that it worked yesterday, that I just needed the basics. A woman in a fur-lined coat scoffed. "This is what is wrong with this country. People like her draining the system and wasting everybody's time. People like her." The words hit harder than the card decline. I backed away slowly, trying to gather my things, but the cashier stopped me gently and said the items had to stay. Rules. I nodded, even though I could barely see through the blur in my eyes. My hands felt numb as I left the line and moved toward the exit. I could feel everyone staring at me, judging me, deciding exactly who I was, without knowing anything at all. The automatic doors opened and a cold rain slapped my face. The sky was already dark, even though it was barely 6. My breath left me in white puffs as I stepped under the awning, trying to gather myself. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to vanish into the cracks of the pavement. Then I saw them. At the far end of the awning near the concrete pillar, a man huddled on the ground with a little girl tucked beneath his coat. He was soaked. His jeans clung to his legs and his hair dripped water down the back of his collar, but he held his coat open just enough to shield her. The girl was small, maybe 4 or 5. Her cheeks were red, her lashes wet. She pressed her face into his chest and whispered that she was cold. He pulled her closer immediately. "I am right here, sweetheart. I know. We will be okay." His voice cracked at the end. A man pushing a cart walked around them in a wide arc as if they carried disease. Another man pointed toward the edge of the lot and said, "The shelters are that way. You cannot loiter here." The father nodded in apology, even though he had done nothing wrong. The girl's small shoulders shook as she coughed. Something tugged inside me hard, sharp, almost painful. I had nothing. I had no groceries, no working card, barely any money left until Friday. I was nobody, and the world reminded me of that every chance it got, but I could not unsee them. His trembling hands, her trembling body. My mother's voice rose in my memory, saying something she told me since childhood. "If you can still help when you have nothing, that is when it matters the most." I swallowed, wiped my sleeve under my eyes, and walked toward them despite every instinct telling me to mind my own business. The man looked up as I approached. His eyes were tired but gentle, the kind of eyes that belonged to someone who once had a different life, someone who had lost too much. "Hi," I said, my voice small and shaky. "I have a small apartment a few blocks away. It is warm. You can stay for the night if you need." He stared at me stunned, as if he could not decide whether to trust me or run. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "We do not want to trouble you." I shook my head. "It is no trouble." The little girl peeked out at me with big brown eyes. She whispered, "Daddy, please." He exhaled slowly as if releasing weeks of fear. "Thank you," he said softly. "Truly." I nodded, though my heart hammered in my chest. I had no idea then that the moment I opened my mouth, the moment I offered them shelter, was the moment my entire life turned in a direction I never expected. The kind that would change everything. forever. The walk to my apartment took less than 10 minutes, but with every step I took beside the man and his little girl, it felt like crossing a bridge into some unfamiliar version of my life. Rain tapped against the cracked pavement, and the girl's small fingers clutched the man's collar, her cheek pressed to his shoulder. He held her the way people hold the most precious thing they have in this world, carefully, protectively, even though he was shivering beneath the thin fabric of his jacket. My building was the kind you never notice unless you live there, old brick patched over with newer brick and a stairwell light that flickered like it had trouble deciding if it wanted to stay alive. I pushed open the door, embarrassed for reasons I could not fully explain, maybe because I wished I had something better to offer them, something safer. Something that did not creak whenever the wind blew. The man stepped inside and paused, taking in the space. His shoulders relaxed just a fraction as the warmth reached him. "I'm Anna," I said finally. He nodded once. "I'm Daniel, and this is Lily." The little girl peeked over his shoulder, her curls damp and shining, her eyes wide as she whispered, "Hi." Her voice was so soft it felt like it could break if someone breathed too hard. I pointed toward the couch in the small living room. "You can set her down there. It'll be warmer once I turn on the heater." Daniel placed her gently on the cushions, brushing a wet curl from her forehead. Lily shivered once, then curled into the blanket I handed her. "Thank you." Daniel said, his voice quiet, almost reverent. "You didn't have to do this." I felt a nervous laugh push at my throat. Honestly, I think I had to. He looked at me, then really looked as if trying to understand the kind of person who opens their home to strangers in the rain. It was a strange moment filled with a kind of quiet recognition, something I could not name. I busied myself in the kitchen heating water for tea and rummaging through cabinets for the last packet of instant noodles I had. It was not much, but it was hot, and right now that felt like the only thing that mattered. While the water boiled, I stole glances at the living room. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, his wet clothes clinging to him. Every few seconds he checked Lily adjusting the blanket, brushing her cheek, watching every breath she took as if he needed the reassurance. When I came back with 2 mugs of tea, he stood automatically as if raised with manners that never left him. I shook my head and gestured for him to stay seated. He hesitated, then sat again, accepting the cup with both hands. The steam rose around his face, softening the sharper lines of exhaustion etched into his features. "You're very kind," he said after a moment. "I'm not sure we deserved this." That startled me the way he said "we," as if both he and his daughter somehow shared the same undeservingness. "Nobody deserves to freeze in the rain," I said, "and nobody deserves to be ignored." His eyes flicked toward mine, surprised by the firmness in my voice. For a moment, we simply sat there. 2 tired strangers trying to make sense of the same cold world. Lily stirred, then her eyes fluttering open. She blinked up at Daniel before noticing me. "The pretty lady saved us," she whispered. Heat rushed to my cheeks and I laughed awkwardly. "I didn't save anyone. I just opened a door." "That's saving," Lily insisted with the unquestioning certainty only children possess. She picked up a worn crayon from her pocket, then a folded scrap of paper, and began drawing with clumsy determination. Daniel watched her with a soft, longing expression, then exhaled and leaned back. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "She gets attached easily." I tilted my head. "That's not a bad thing." He hesitated before answering. "It is when you can't promise anything stable." Something about his voice made my chest tighten. Not pity, recognition. I understood instability. I lived it. After a while, Daniel stood again and carried the 2 bowls of noodles to the table for me without being asked. He handled them carefully, instinctively, like someone used to doing things for others. When I passed behind him in the narrow kitchen, he stepped aside immediately, giving more space than necessary. Every movement he made was controlled, respectful, deliberate. Not like most men I had met. Not like the ones who took more space than they needed or expected gratitude for the smallest decency. Daniel behaved like kindness was his default setting, not a currency. After dinner, he washed the dishes even when I told him he didn't need to. I watched from the doorway as he tightened the loose hinge on one cabinet, testing it twice before letting it go. "You fix things," I said quietly. He didn't look up. "Only the things I know how to fix." His voice was calm, but heavy with something unspoken. When he turned around, I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, but Lily suddenly appeared at my side, tugging gently on my sleeve. "I made this," she said proudly, handing me the drawing. A rough crayon picture of 3 figures holding hands beneath a roof. The middle one, the tallest, had Daniel's dark hair. The smallest had puffy curls like hers, and the last one, the one on the right, had long blonde hair and a bright green scribbled dress. Me. My breath caught. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes softening. "I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable," he said quietly. "She doesn't draw many people, just you and me and her," I whispered. He nodded. I looked down at the picture again, my pulse thudding with something I did not understand yet, something warm, something frightening. I hung the drawing on the fridge before I could overthink it. When I turned back, Daniel was watching me with an expression I could not decipher, as if he was trying to decide whether to thank me or apologize for something invisible between us. Then he simply said the words that stayed in my mind long after that night ended. "People don't help men like me. Thank you for being different." I did not expect them to stay another night, but life has a way of placing the right people in your doorway before you are ready to understand why. Lily's fever spiked near dawn, a hot flush across her little cheeks that scared me more than I wanted to admit. Daniel woke instantly when she whimpered, his body snapping upright like a man used to sleeping lightly, used to danger, used to guarding someone. He paced with her in his arms until she finally settled again, pressing her small face into his neck. There was a tenderness in the way he held her that made my chest ache. I boiled water, made a weak tea, handed him a cool cloth, and he thanked me in that soft voice of his each time as if I were performing miracles instead of the simple acts any human should do for another. By afternoon, the fever lowered, and Lily slept deeply on the couch, her breaths finally steady. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses close but not uncomfortably. Daniel sat at the small kitchen table, his long fingers curled around a mug of tea he wasn't drinking. I sat across from him, unsure how silence between 2 strangers could feel more natural than most conversations I had with people I'd known for years. "You're good with her," I said softly. His eyes lifted, a faint surprise flickering across his face before settling into something more guarded. "She's an easy child to love." He said it like a truth carved into him, not a compliment. I glanced at Lily's tiny form under the blanket. "She is easy to love," I agreed. "But you make it look effortless." Daniel's hand tightened around the mug, not dramatically, but enough to notice. "Nothing about this is effortless." His voice rasped slightly, and something in me recognized the kind of tired he carried. Not the tired that sleep fixes, but the tired that grief carves. I wanted to ask him more, but I also didn't want to break whatever small trust was forming between us. So we sat there, 2 people with heavy histories neither of us dared to unravel. The rain started again, tapping lightly against the window. I decided to warm more water and bring out the last packets of tea, just to fill the space with something comforting. When I set a fresh mug in front of him, he looked up with a half smile, small but real. "Thank you. You don't need to keep doing things for us." The words came out before I could stop them. "Maybe I want to." His brow softened at the edges, and for a moment he looked almost younger, almost peaceful. Then his gaze drifted toward the old picture frame on the counter. The one of me and my mother from years ago, before her illness made her world shrink into something small and fragile. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Your mom," I nodded. "She's sick. I care for her when I can. It's been a rough year." He studied the photo as if trying to understand pieces of me I hadn't offered. "You took care of her. You stayed." He said it with no judgment, only recognition. "Yeah," I said with a weak smile. "Someone had to." He went quiet at that, and I wondered if I had said something wrong. Then his gaze dropped to his hands as if the weight of his own thoughts pulled them down. Softly, barely louder than the hum of the fridge, he whispered, "I promised someone I'd always protect her. I failed." My breath stopped. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the way he said them. Like confession, like punishment. His eyes were distant, unfocused, fixed on something only he could see. I opened my mouth to ask, but Lily stirred on the couch, then shifting under the blanket. Daniel jolted slightly, his body tightening as he listened to her breathing. She mumbled something, a tiny sleep-drunk murmur. "Mommy's star." My heart clenched in my chest. Daniel looked as though someone had struck him. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering himself, walls slamming back up with terrifying speed. "I'm sorry," he said, abruptly pushing back from the table. "I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't." His voice broke just for a second before he swallowed it down. I stood too unsure if I should reach for him or let him retreat. Daniel took one slow breath, then another, forcing steadiness back into his frame. "She dreams about her mother," he said quietly, not looking at me. "I try not to let her see how much it hurts." I stepped closer, my voice gentle. "Daniel, you don't have to explain anything." He finally met my eyes, and the pain in them was so raw, I felt it in my bones. "I'm not used to people caring," he said, not without wanting something back. I shook my head. "I don't want anything from you. You're helping us more than you know." He blinked, confused. "By being kind," he whispered. The words felt like a confession carved out of a deeper wound. For a moment, it felt as though the room itself held its breath, waiting to see what either of us would say next. But nothing came. Not clarity, not ease. Just the delicate, trembling silence of two strangers who suddenly knew too much and not enough about each other. A silence interrupted only by Lily's soft breathing, the rain's gentle tapping, and the unmistakable truth settling between us that one sentence he let slip had changed everything. Lily woke with a soft cough the next morning, the kind of cough that made your stomach tighten instead of your heart relax. Daniel picked her up immediately, brushing her curls away from her flushed cheeks. She leaned her head onto his shoulder and whimpered, "Daddy, hurts." He held her closer, whispering something soothing into her hair. I could see the worry in the way he kissed her forehead, in the way his jaw tensed when she coughed again. "It's probably just a cold," I said gently, though I wasn't fully sure. "We should get her some children's cough medicine and maybe some fever reducer. The nearest drugstore is 4 blocks away." Daniel nodded, but glanced down at Lily's trembling body. "I don't want to take her out in the cold again." "I can go," I offered quickly. "You stay here with her." Daniel hesitated, then looked at me with that same quiet gratitude he always carried like a shadow. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "I'll be right back." The drugstore glowed harshly against the dreary morning as I stepped inside. The bright fluorescent lights made everything look colder, not warmer. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and headed to the children's medicine aisle. When I reached for a small bottle of grape-flavored cough syrup, my hand shook slightly. It wasn't the cost I could afford, a $10 bottle. It was the memory of the night before the weight of Daniel's confession, the sight of him cracking open for a single breath before sealing himself shut. I held the bottle to my chest a moment longer than necessary before walking to the register. The cashier was young, early 20s at most, chewing gum loudly and tapping her acrylic nails on the counter. She didn't bother looking at me as she scanned the bottle. "That'll be $13.89. I pulled out my wallet. It was old, the fabric frayed at the seams, and when I opened it, the thinness of it must have caught her attention, because she finally looked up and looked me over. Her gaze flickered from my worn coat to my scuffed shoes to the cheap gloves I wore with a hole forming at the thumb. Her expression changed subtly, but I caught it, pity flavored with judgment. "You want a bag or no?" she asked flatly. Before I could respond, a woman behind me sighed loudly. "Can you hurry it up? Some of us have jobs to get to." I stiffened, tucking my wallet away quickly. The cashier narrowed her eyes. "You know we have generic brands that are cheaper. This one's the same thing, but—" She reached to replace the bottle with something cheaper, and I stepped back instinctively. "I'm fine with this one." She shrugged, annoyed, and handed it back. "Suit yourself. Must be nice having someone else pay for things." My heart dropped into my stomach. I blinked. "What?" She rolled her eyes, gesturing vaguely toward the door. "That man you're always with, the one you brought in the other day, asking about pain relievers. I remember you." I didn't know what to say. Daniel had come in with me last week when I bought ibuprofen for my mom. I had no idea the cashier had even noticed. The woman behind me laughed under her breath. "Honey, some women just know how to pick them. I'd kill for a man to buy my groceries." Heat shot up my neck. I tried to protest. "That's not—" But the cashier cut me off. "People talk, you know." I heard he's staying with you. Must be real nice. I could feel every person in line staring at me now. Shame crawled up my throat like a burning rope. That's not what's happening, I said quietly, but my voice shook. Whatever you say, she muttered, snapping her gum again. The man behind her chuckled. Found yourself a homeless boyfriend, huh? I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. The room tilted slightly, and for a split second I couldn't breathe. I forced my fingers to grip the bottle tighter. I am not with him. I don't use people. The cashier shrugged. Didn't say you did, but honestly, girls like you... She paused, smiling with poisoned sweetness. You don't get guys like him without a reason. The humiliation struck like a slap. Every insecurity I had carried for years rose in my throat, choking me. I paid quickly, pushing the bottle into my pocket and rushing toward the exit, trying desperately not to cry before I reached the door. But halfway there, a voice behind me stopped everything. That's enough. Everything stilled. The air changed. I turned slowly. Daniel stood in the doorway. Lily bundled in his arms, her small hand fisted around his coat collar. He had walked all the way here after me. His shoulders were squared, his jaw set, but it was his eyes that silenced the entire store. Not angry, not yelling, just steady, firm, human. He walked past me, placing himself between me and the cashier with a quiet authority that commanded the room without raising the volume. She helped us. She opened her home to my daughter and me when she had nothing to gain. She deserves your respect. His words were calm, but the truth in them cracked the air open like a fault line. No one said a thing. Even the gum snapping stopped. Daniel shifted Lily gently in his arms and looked at me. Ready to go home, I nodded my breath, trembling. He didn't touch me, didn't grab my hand. He just walked beside me as we stepped into the cold morning. But somehow, that quiet walk side by side felt like the most protective thing anyone had done for me in years. And as we reached the sidewalk, Daniel glanced at me, his voice low. You don't deserve to be talked to like that. Not ever. I swallowed hard, fighting the sting in my eyes. And for the first time, I felt something change. The world had tried to humiliate me again, but this time I wasn't standing alone. When we got back to my apartment, Lily was already asleep in Daniel's arms, her tiny body curled into him like he was the only safe place she knew. I held the door open as he carried her inside, moving slowly so he would not jostle her. There was something about the way he looked at her that I had never seen before in any parent, not even in the exhausted mothers I saw in waiting rooms and grocery aisles. It wasn't just love. It was grief braided into devotion, something fragile and sacred that made my chest ache just watching him. He laid her gently on the couch, tucking the blanket around her shoulders, the way someone who had done it 1,000 times would then sat beside her and brushed a curl from her forehead. She didn't stir. She trusted him completely. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to warm water for tea, mostly to give him space. But I kept glancing toward the couch, drawn in by the sight of a man who had been humiliated in the drugstore and still carried himself with quiet dignity. A man who had stood between me and the world with nothing but his voice. A man whose eyes carried storms he never explained. When I finally brought him tea, he was leaning back, exhaustion softening the sharp edges of his face. He whispered a thank you as he took the cup, fingers brushing mine for half a second too long, leaving a warmth that lingered even after I stepped away. While he sipped slowly, I started tidying the small mess Lily had made earlier. Crayons scattered, the blanket she had played with flopped on the floor, her little socks tucked under the chair. When I reached to pick up the crayons near the armchair, my fingers brushed something cold on the floor. A phone, Daniel's phone. I didn't mean to touch it. I just wanted to place it back on the table before he noticed it had fallen. But the moment I lifted it, the screen lit up. Not the lock screen. The email app. Open. Active. And one line of bold text glowed at the top of the screen. Brennan Group Board Meeting Agenda. My breath caught. Brennan Group. The Brennan Group. The name wasn't unfamiliar. It was the name printed on my old workplace's brochures. A massive corporation. Real estate, tech investments, philanthropy, national news coverage. But the rest of the email was even more shocking. Attached financial forecast for Q1 provided by COO Daniel Brennan. COO. My throat closed. I looked toward Daniel instinctively, but he was half dozing, head leaning back, eyes closed, unaware that his entire truth was glowing from the screen in my hand. I should have dropped the phone immediately. I should have pretended I saw nothing. I should have returned it to the table. But my fingers didn't move. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. COO Daniel Brennan. That name. Brennan. I turned toward Lily on the couch. Her last name I had never asked. The phone vibrated in my hand and another email notification appeared. From the board to Daniel Brennan. Subject: Your leave of absence extension. We understand your need for continued personal time. Please know the company fully supports your grieving process. The breath hitched in my throat. Grieving. My hands went cold. I swallowed hard, the pieces snapping together with painful clarity. Brennan Group, a powerful executive who vanished from the media 8 months ago. A daughter always clinging to him. A man who said he failed to protect someone. His wife. Lily's mother. I set the phone down, but my mind kept racing, threads of truth weaving too fast to stop. My curiosity pulled me toward my laptop before my conscience could stop me. I typed his name. Daniel Brennan. Articles appeared immediately. Public figure profiles, financial journals, photos. My stomach clenched. His face was unmistakable. Cleaner shaven, suited, confident, standing at a podium. Standing beside a stunning woman with long chestnut hair. Standing with a toddler, Lily in his arms. Headline after headline. COO Daniel Brennan steps back. After wife's battle with cancer. Brennan Group confirms long-term leave for Brennan following family tragedy. Industry genius. Daniel Brennan retreats from public eye. My hand flew to my mouth. I stared at the screen until everything blurred. Daniel Brennan. Not a struggling father. Not a man down on his luck. A man shattered by grief. A man drowning quietly behind a facade the world once photographed every week. A man who ended up outside a store in the cold, not because he was irresponsible, but because he had lost everything that anchored him. I shut the laptop quickly, breath trembling. Guilt slammed into me. I had invaded something sacred, something he clearly never meant to show me. I turned slowly toward him. He was awake now, watching me from the couch. His face unreadable, his voice soft. Anna. My heart lodged in my throat. He didn't know what I had seen. He didn't know the truth was now pulsing inside me like a live wire. I forced myself to breathe normally. I forced a smile. You dropped your phone earlier. It lit up. Sorry. I placed it gently on the table beside him, hoping he wouldn't see the panic still swirling in my eyes. He studied me for a long moment, as if sensing something had shifted, as if the air between us had thinned. Thank you, he murmured finally. I nodded, retreating toward the kitchen. My hands shook uncontrollably as I gripped the counter. I closed my eyes, fighting the storm inside me. He wasn't who I thought, and yet he was exactly who I thought. The man who stood up for me, the father who protected his daughter, the soul who carried grief quietly. The truth didn't make him a stranger. It made him real. But it also made one terrifying question echo through my chest. Why was a man like him here? With me, I swallowed hard, whispering to myself. He wasn't just homeless. He was a man with a broken heart, and now I knew a truth I never should have found. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his name glowing on the phone screen, saw the headlines about the COO who vanished after losing his wife, saw photos of a man who once lived in polished boardrooms and marble lobbies now sleeping under my thin blanket on a second-hand couch. By morning, my stomach felt hollow with worry guilt and something else I couldn't name. Daniel was in the kitchen when I woke up quietly washing the mug I left in the sink. Lily was still asleep, tiny breaths rising and falling beneath the quilt. He turned when he heard my footsteps offering a faint smile. Good morning. His voice was soft, steady, exactly like someone who had not lived a corporate life. It was the voice of a man who carried humility like a second skin. I forced a smile back. Morning. I tried to act normal, but the air between us felt charged with everything I knew but couldn't say. He dried his hands and reached for his coat as if prepared to leave, even though the sky outside was still painted with pre-dawn blue. You don't have to go, I said quickly before I even thought. He paused. We've stayed too long. It's been one night. And you've given enough, he replied, slipping one arm into his coat. Anna, I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. That word hit me like a small bruise. Kindness. The articles had described him as brilliant, a visionary, a private man, a grieving husband, but not once had they said he was kind. Yet here he was, thanking me for offering soup and a borrowed couch. I stepped closer. Daniel, Lily isn't well. You saw how she coughed last night. He went still like someone being pulled backward into a memory. I know, he whispered, but we'll figure it out. Let her rest here, I insisted, just until she feels better. He shook his head. I don't want to rely on anyone, not anymore. His words were gentle, but they cut deep. There was a loneliness in them that made my chest tighten. I thought of the line he said the night before. I promised someone I'd always protect her. I failed. He wasn't rejecting my help. He was punishing himself. Stepping forward, I lowered my voice. Daniel, helping isn't a burden, not to me. He met my eyes, then really met them, and something flickered. Fear, hope, confusion all tangled together. Why, he asked quietly. Why are you doing this? It was the question every person who had ever been hurt asks when kindness comes too close. I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, Lily coughed from the couch, a soft, strained sound that made all three of us turn. Daniel immediately moved to her side, kneeling beside her, brushing her hair back. Daddy, she murmured. I'm here, sweetheart. She coughed again, harder this time. Instinctively, I crouched beside them. She needs rest, fluids, warmth. Daniel's jaw clenched. She needs stability, and I can't even give her that. Something inside him broke on that last word, and something inside me moved to meet it without hesitation. Let me help, I whispered. He didn't even look at me. Kindness is expensive for people like me. The words were quiet but devastating, as though he believed accepting help would cost him more than losing everything had. I shook my head. Not with me. It doesn't cost anything with me. His shoulders dropped just a fraction, but enough for me to see he was fighting himself. Fighting every instinct to run, to avoid becoming someone's burden, to avoid letting anyone see his cracks. Lily coughed again, and this time she reached out blindly, small fingers brushing my wrist. Anna, she whispered. My throat hurts. That did it. I felt Daniel shudder beside me. Something inside him caved. Okay, he said finally, voice barely audible. We'll stay today. Relief washed through me, warm and overwhelming. I stood and moved toward the kitchen to make tea and broth, giving him space. But behind me, I felt his eyes watching a mixture of gratitude and unease. By mid-morning, Lily drifted back to sleep. Daniel and I sat at the table, the silence between us too loud, too full. I couldn't hold it anymore. Daniel, I began softly, I know you left something behind. Something heavy. His eyes snapped to mine. Guarded. Sharp. Anna, you don't have to tell me, I said quickly. But you also don't have to carry everything alone. He stiffened, recognizing the truth behind my words. Maybe recognizing that I knew more than I should. His voice dropped. You saw something. I took a breath. Your phone lit up last night when I picked it up. I swear I didn't mean to look. His jaw tightened. What did you see? The tension in the room grew like a slow storm. Just an email, a meeting notice, your name. He exhaled a long, pained breath, leaning back in the chair like the truth finally found him. I didn't want you to know. I figured that. People treat me differently when they know. He rubbed his forehead. Or worse, they pity me. I don't, I said quietly. I don't pity you at all. He looked up sharply. Something softened. Then why, he asked again. Why help us because someone should? I said simply. Because no one helped me when I needed it most. and because Lily deserves warmth, food, safety. That's it, no hidden meaning. He stared at me like no one had ever said that to him. Then something in his expression fractured. Anna, I don't know how to let someone help me. I reached across the table slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Then let this be the first time I whispered. His hand trembled when it touched mine. Not from fear of me, from fear of hope. And I knew in that intimate, fragile moment that helping him wasn't just about survival or kindness. It was about giving back a piece of humanity he had lost long before he ever knocked on my door. The next morning began too quietly, too still. The kind of quiet that settles like dust over a room, like something has already happened before you even open your eyes. I woke to the pale light slipping through my curtains, blinking away sleep. For a moment, everything felt normal, or at least as normal as life could feel with a grieving father and his sick daughter asleep in my small living room. But when I stepped out of my bedroom and saw the empty couch, the neatly folded blanket, the pillow placed perfectly at the armrest, my chest tightened. "Daniel!" I called softly. No answer. "Lily." Nothing. A cold prickle ran along my arms. I checked the bathroom. Empty. The kitchen. Empty. The entire apartment felt hollow, like someone had quietly scooped its heart out while I slept. Then I saw it. On the small table near the window where the morning sun landed first lay a single piece of paper folded cleanly in half. My hands shook as I reached for it, unfolding it with a strange mix of dread and knowing. The handwriting was unmistakably his. "Thank you for giving us safety. That's more than enough." No signature, no explanation, no goodbye. My throat closed. I sank into the chair as the weight of those 11 words pressed down on me. He was gone, just like that, after everything, after finally allowing himself to accept help, after letting me see the cracks, the grief, the man behind the exhaustion. He was gone. I didn't even know what hurt worse, that he left or that he felt he had to. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at the note, the apartment around me too silent, too still. Then my eyes caught color. Bright, childish. A flash of pink, blue, and yellow. A drawing. I hadn't noticed it before. It was tucked under the note as if Lily had placed it there with small, careful hands. I lifted it gently. 3 figures. Crayon bodies shaky but full of life. A tall man with dark hair. A woman with long hair colored in yellow. In the middle, a tiny girl with big round eyes. All 3 were holding hands. Above them in wobbly letters, Lily had written one word: home. My breath hitched. Tears blurred the edges of the page, and I pressed it against my chest as a sob escaped me. How could a child draw something so hopeful? A future, a dream, only for her father to rip it away before sunrise. Why did he think leaving was the safer choice? Why did he think I would ever see him as a burden? I folded into myself, shoulders shaking, the drawing trembling in my hands. I hadn't cried like that in years. Not from stress, not from exhaustion, but from a very particular kind of loss. The loss of someone who was never truly yours to begin with. Someone who stepped into your life just long enough to give you something to hope for. I don't know how long I stayed on the kitchen floor, tears pooling on the tile. At some point, my neighbor knocked on the door, her voice sharp even through the wood. "You all right in there, sweetheart?" she asked, not actually worried, just nosy. I didn't answer. She huffed. "I figured that man would leave." "Men like that don't stay with girls like you." The words stabbed deeper than she could ever know. Girls like you. Poor. Overlooked. Disposable. I pressed my palm to my mouth, trying to keep from crying out loud. When she finally walked away, her footsteps fading down the hall, I let myself crumble again. Because the worst part was that a small, terrified piece of me believed her. The rest of the day moved in a blur. I searched the streets nearby, even though I knew it was pointless. I checked the cafe where we bought tea, the small park across the block, the bus stop near the pharmacy. Nothing. No trace of him. No trace of Lily. Just the fading echo of their presence in my tiny apartment, like warmth leaving a room after someone blows out a candle. I came home exhausted, the drawing still clutched in my hand. I pinned it to the fridge with trembling fingers. It hung there crookedly, the crayon colors bright against the dull metal. A reminder, a wound, a prayer. For the next 2 days, I kept hoping there would be a knock on the door, that he would come back apologizing, explaining, maybe saying he made a mistake. But no one came. The silence grew heavier. I still made extra tea in the mornings and caught myself glancing toward the couch at night, but it stayed empty. On the third night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last few days. His gentle voice, his cautious hands when he tucked Lily's hair behind her ear, his fear of needing someone, his belief that kindness cost too much, and suddenly, I understood. Daniel had not left because he didn't care. He left because he cared too much, because losing someone before broke him in a way he didn't know how to repair, and letting me matter even a little terrified him. But knowing that didn't make the apartment feel any less empty, or my chest any less hollow. I held Lily's drawing against my heart and whispered into the dark, "You didn't have to disappear. Not from me." The only answer was silence, the kind that hurts, the kind that stays. I did not realize when the unraveling began. Maybe it was already happening long before that week arrived, like tiny fractures beneath concrete that no one sees until the whole sidewalk gives way. All I know is that on Monday morning, I still believed I could hold my life together with cheap coffee, strong will, and whatever hope I had left. By Sunday night, I was sitting on the cold linoleum floor of my kitchen, holding a crayon drawing in my shaking hands, wondering how a person could break so quietly. It started with my workplace cutting hours. Not because of anything I did wrong, they simply replaced half the staff with self-checkout machines. My manager, a man who always looked exhausted and slightly irritated, called me into the back office. "Anna, we are cutting shifts. You will get 8 hours this week, maybe 12 next week." His tone had that scripted sympathy used in corporate training videos. I nodded as if it was fine, as if losing 2/3 of my income was a normal inconvenience like running out of milk. Inside, something twisted. When I stepped out of the store into the gray morning, the wind cut through my thin jacket and I felt suddenly porous, like the world could blow through me. On Tuesday, my landlord taped a notice to my door. Rent increased by $200. No explanation, just a printed letter that said due to rising costs. I stood in the hallway holding the paper, unable to breathe, for several seconds. My building was old with rust on the radiators and a stairwell that smelled faintly of damp cardboard. $200 was not an increase. It was a sentence. I folded the notice and slipped it into my pocket, like hiding it made it disappear. It didn't. Bills never disappear. They wait. Wednesday should have been quiet. Instead, when I came home, I found my mother sitting on the edge of her bed, clutching her chest. Not severe pain, she insisted, just discomfort. But discomfort in a woman with diabetes and heart complications is never just discomfort. I called the clinic. They told me to bring her in. The nurse at the front desk handed me a clipboard. "No insurance on file," she said without looking up. I swallowed. "It expired last month. I've been trying to renew it." She slid a new form toward me, her voice flat. "Well, you will have to pay up front for today's visit." I nodded, even though my stomach sank. The number on the bill looked unreal, like it belonged to someone wealthier, someone who could pay without feeling a part of themselves collapse. I paid anyway. I always do. My mother apologized the whole ride home. I told her to stop. She did not cause any of this. The world simply charges interest on people who are already drowning. Thursday broke me in a way nothing else had. My paycheck did not come in. "Payroll error," the HR voicemail explained cheerfully. "We will reissue next week." Next week. They said it like it was a small inconvenience. Like I did not need that money to buy groceries, to buy bus fare, to survive. By now, my thoughts were a fog. I moved through the day in a daze, everything muffled. Even the air felt heavier. I tried stretching the last of my pantry food. 2 potatoes, half a bag of rice, a can of soup someone at work gave me months ago. I cooked slowly, my hands robotic, my mind somewhere else entirely. Then Friday arrived with one more blow. A letter from collections. Medical bill overdue. Threat of wage garnishment. I stood in my kitchen with the paper in my hand and felt something inside me slip. like a knot loosening, like a dam cracking. I tried to keep going, tried to pretend I could handle it. I cleaned the counter, folded laundry, washed the dishes, normal tasks like rituals meant to keep me tethered to something. But that fragile thread snapped when I opened the refrigerator and saw the crayon drawing Lily had made for me. The one with the 3 stick figures holding hands. The one that said we belong under the same sky. I had taped it there weeks ago after Daniel and Lily disappeared from my life without goodbye. I reached out to touch it just lightly with the edge of my finger. And then, for reasons I cannot explain, the magnet loosened and the paper fluttered to the floor. That sound, that soft whisper of paper hitting tile, undid me completely. I slid down to my knees, my back hitting the cabinets, my arms wrapping around myself. The tears came fast and without grace. Not quiet tears, not contained ones. This was sobbing loud and broken, the kind that leaves you gasping. My body shook. My heartbeat stumbled. My breath hitched uncontrollably. I felt small, like a child who had been left behind at a store and only now realized no one was coming back. I do not know how long I stayed there. At some point, the apartment grew cold. The overhead light flickered. My phone buzzed with another payment reminder I could not bring myself to open. I pressed the crayon drawing to my chest. The colors smeared slightly where my tears soaked through. I whispered, I am trying. I am trying so hard. But trying does not always change anything. Not when the world decides you are nobody. And that week, the world made sure I felt it. And yet, in the middle of that collapse, I did not know something was already on its way to me. Something that would shift the ground beneath my feet. Something that would open a door I never knew existed. But that would come later. That night, I let myself break. Because there was nothing left to hold together. I woke the next morning feeling like someone had poured sand into my veins. Heavy, slow, barely moving. The kind of tired that sleep does not cure. I dragged myself through the motions of the day, folding blankets, checking on my mother, brewing weak coffee that tasted like warm water. My eyes burned from crying, but there were no tears left. Even grief gets exhausted. Around noon, I walked down the hallway to check the mailbox. Mostly, I expected ads, overdue notices, maybe another bill with red letters across the front. I did not expect anything else. Hope was not something I allowed myself to feel anymore. When I opened the mailbox, an envelope slid out and landed near my feet. Thick, heavy, cream-colored, embossed lettering. The kind of envelope that belongs in a lawyer's office or a corporate boardroom, not in the rusted mail slot of my rundown apartment building. My name was written in elegant print. Miss Anna Pierce. My breath caught. I turned it over. There was a gold seal on the back with a name I recognized instantly, even though I had seen it only once before in an email on Daniel's phone. Brennan Foundation. My fingers went cold. For a moment, I couldn't open it. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't even think. My heartbeat thrummed in my ears as I walked back into my apartment, closed the door with my shoulder, and sat down at the small kitchen table. The same table where Daniel once fixed the wobbly leg. The same table where Lily drew her crooked little stars. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a formal letter printed on thick paper. I read the first line 3 times before my mind allowed the meaning to register. Dear Miss Pierce, you are invited to interview for the position of Community Outreach Assistant at the Brennan Foundation. You were personally recommended by Mr. Daniel Brennan. For a full minute, my mind emptied, silent, still. Then the thoughts began to crash. Why would he recommend me? How did he find my address? What made him think I deserved anything after the way I fell apart after the way he left? I pressed a hand to my chest as my heart kicked against my ribs. I tried to tell myself it was a mistake. Maybe they meant another Anna. Maybe Daniel submitted the name weeks ago and forgot about it. Maybe this was charity disguised as opportunity. But one sentence at the bottom shattered every one of those excuses. We look forward to meeting you in person. Security will escort you to the executive floor. Executive floor! There was only one reason someone would need to be escorted there. Daniel would be there, watching, waiting, or maybe regretting everything. I read the letter again, slowly letting each word settle into me like drops of warm water thawing my frozen insides. This was real. This was happening. This was him reaching out across the distance he had created through silence he had chosen, offering something I did not understand. The interview was scheduled for the next morning at 9, less than 24 hours. I stared at my reflection in the window, pale, hollow-eyed, hair pulled back in a messy bun, clothes that looked one wash away from falling apart. I did not look like someone who belonged in a foundation named after one of the wealthiest families in the state. I looked like someone who had been stepped on by life more times than she could count. But he asked for me. He wanted me there. That thought alone made my chest ache in a way I could not describe. I spent the evening preparing, not with expensive clothes or polished resumes. I had neither. I washed the only blouse I owned that did not have a stain on it. I pressed my black slacks with an iron so old it sputtered steam like a dying kettle. I brushed my hair until it shone, even if only a little. I laid the letter on my nightstand like a fragile treasure, reading it again before bed. Personal recommendation, Daniel Brennan. The man who fixed my cabinet. The man who slept on my couch. The man who held his daughter like she was the last piece of joy he had left in the world. The man who vanished without goodbye. Sleep refused to come. I tossed, turned, sat up, lay down again. My mind ran through every possible scenario. What if he was doing this out of guilt? What if he only wanted to repay a debt? What if he regretted ever coming into my life? What if he wished he had never met me at all? But somewhere beneath all those thoughts was a softer one, fragile, flickering like a candle flame. What if he missed me? The next morning, I woke before dawn, my stomach knotted, my hands clammy, fear and hope tangled together in my chest. I rode the bus across town, gripping the metal bar so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I stepped off in front of the Brennan building, my breath caught. It towered above everything else, all glass and steel and confidence. People in tailored suits flowed in and out of the revolving doors like it was nothing. I felt like an imposter in a world I had no map for. The security guard checked my ID, then motioned me through. "Executive floor," he said. He pressed the button for the top level. The elevator doors closed. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Each floor ticked past in a soft chime. 31, 32, 33. The doors slid open. And there he was. Daniel stood near the windows, hands in his pockets, sunlight outlining his silhouette. His hair was neatly combed, his shirt crisp, his posture calm, but his eyes softened the moment they met mine. "Anna," he said quietly, as if my name meant something. I froze. My breath stilled. Before I could speak, a small voice squealed behind him. "We found her daddy." Lily ran toward me in tiny, excited steps, her arms open wide. Daniel watched her, then looked back at me. "I hoped you would come," he said. And in that instant, the week that crushed me began to loosen its grip. The executive floor was quiet in a way that made every breath feel louder than it should have been. I stood there frozen as Lily wrapped her little arms around my hips, her cheek warm against my coat. For a moment, I could not move, could not speak. All I could do was feel the faint tremble in her voice as she whispered my name like she had been waiting for me. When I finally lifted my gaze to Daniel, his expression was steady, but something fragile trembled behind his calm. Guilt, relief, something unspoken. He motioned gently toward a small lounge area near the windows. I followed, taking slow, careful steps while Lily held my hand as if she feared I would disappear again. Daniel waited until we sat before he spoke. "I owe you the truth," he said quietly. I nodded because there was nothing else I could offer. My throat had closed around every question I wanted to ask. "Why did you leave? Why without goodbye? Why now?" Daniel rubbed his palms together as if warming them. "When I left your apartment that morning, it was not because I was ungrateful. I know that is what it looked like." The words hit a sensitive place in me, a bruise he could not see, but somehow still touched. I kept my eyes down. "You gave us shelter," he continued. "You gave Lily the first real night of comfort she had had in weeks. And you gave me something I had not let myself feel in a long time. Safety." I looked up, then startled. He held my gaze. Kindness is dangerous for someone like me, he said. I frowned, confused. He exhaled slowly. After my wife passed, people treated me like a broken glass they could not set down. Everyone had opinions on how I should grieve. Everyone tried to fix me. Everyone wanted something from the widowed Brennan heir. Everyone except you. I felt my stomach twist. You did not ask anything, he said softly. You did not push. You did not pry. You just helped because that is who you are. Lily climbed onto his lap, then curling into him with effortless trust. His hand rested on her small back. That morning, he continued, I looked at you sleeping on your couch and felt something I was not ready for. Something that terrified me. He swallowed hard. I cared. My heart thudded painfully. I wanted to ask how that could possibly be true after one night, how someone like him could care for someone like me, but he kept going. Caring about someone new felt like betrayal to the woman I lost, and you had already done so much. I was scared I would cling to you out of loneliness, not honesty. So you left, I whispered. His jaw tightened. I left because I am a coward when it comes to losing people. I know what it feels like to have your world ripped away in one afternoon. I could not risk letting Lily love someone who might walk away. The words struck deep. I had never thought of myself as someone a child could love or miss. But she had, and he knew it. I opened my mouth to speak, but my voice cracked. Why not just tell me? He gave a sad, tired smile. You already had too much weight on your shoulders. I did not want to be another burden you carried. A bitter laugh escaped me. You were never a burden. You were the opposite of it. His shoulders dropped, the tension unspooling slowly. That is what scared me, he said quietly. I didn't want to need anyone again. I didn't want Lily to need anyone again. We lost everything once. I could not let us lose more. Lily reached for my hand, then fitting her fingers between mine like a puzzle piece. Daddy woke up crying. Sometimes, she whispered, we missed you. My chest stung so sharply I had to blink fast to keep my vision from blurring. Daniel looked away, blinking hard himself. I had prepared for so many possibilities walking in here. Anger, awkwardness, a polite thank you and goodbye. I had not prepared for this. Vulnerability, grief, the quiet confession of a man who had held too much pain alone. Daniel leaned forward slightly. I have been trying to build my life again with careful, measured steps, he said. Slow, steady. But then you opened your door and everything shifted at once. You reminded me how good it feels to come home to warmth. You reminded me that hope is not foolish, and that scared me more than anything. I pressed a hand over my heart because it was beating too fast, too full. When I recommended you for this job, he continued, it was not out of guilt. It was because you deserved a life that sees you the way I saw you that night. And because I wanted you close, even if I did not know how to say it. The room felt impossibly quiet. The question inside me rose, slowly, hesitant, trembling. So what now? Daniel lifted his eyes to mine. His voice was soft, stripped of every wall he had ever built. Now, I want to do this the right way. Not running, not hiding, not assuming the worst will happen. He paused. I want you in our life. Lily squeezed my hand. Stay with us, she whispered. Her voice was tiny, but hopeful in a way that felt like a prayer. I felt something warm break open inside my chest. I breathed in slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle. I do not know how to be enough, I admitted softly. I am just me, not someone polished, not someone extraordinary. Daniel shook his head gently. You are exactly enough, Anna. You have been enough since the moment you offered us warmth. Our eyes stayed locked, something fragile and bright bridging the space between us. For the first time since the night I met him, I felt the shift inside me. Fear loosening, hope rising. Slow, careful, real. The night of the gala arrived with a weight I could feel in my bones, the kind of tight, restless feeling that made my breath sit high in my chest. I had never been to an event like this. The building glittered with glass and gold as though the entire place had been polished just for people who had never tasted fear or struggled to afford groceries. I walked beside Daniel and Lily, trying not to stare at the chandeliers or the executives stepping out of black cars. I kept smoothing the side of my simple navy dress because it felt wrong among gowns that shimmered like constellations. But Daniel stayed close, offering me small reassurances in the way he angled his shoulder near mine, or how his hand hovered just inches from the small of my back as if to tell me I was not alone. Inside the ballroom, the air hummed with conversation and clinking glasses. Executives in tailored suits and partners in glittering dresses floated between white tablecloths and floral arrangements so tall they looked like trees. Lily held my hand tightly, her little fingers warm inside mine as she looked around with wide, bright eyes. "Daddy, this place is too shiny," she whispered. I bent down and murmured, "Me too, sweetheart," which made her giggle. Daniel glanced back, smiling softly at us, and in that moment, nothing about the room felt intimidating. Until it did. I heard my name before I saw the woman saying it. Julie Harper. The tone was sugar-coated but sharp enough to cut. When I turned, a tall, elegant woman with silver earrings and a sequined dress stood in front of me wearing a smile stretched too thin. I recognized her faintly from seeing her around the building. One of the board members' wives. Her eyes skimmed my dress, my hair then landed on Daniel, and something cold passed through them. "So you're the one they're talking about," she said brightly. My stomach tightened. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I am not sure what you mean." She leaned in, just enough for her perfume to crowd the air between us. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "Pretty faces climb fast in this company, especially when the boss likes them." Heat flushed across my skin as if someone had slapped me. I felt the humiliation rising up my throat, burning hot and suffocating. A few people nearby glanced over. Someone whispered. Someone snickered. My vision blurred for a second, and the ballroom suddenly felt too bright, too loud, too sharp. I swallowed hard, gripping my clutch until my fingers ached. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run. Lily's hand squeezed mine. "Julie," she whispered, worried. Before I could respond, everything shifted, because Daniel had stepped forward. He had moved so quietly I had not even noticed until he was standing between me and that woman, his presence calm, steady, and unmistakably commanding. His voice when he spoke was not loud, but it cut through the entire space like a clean blade. "That is enough!" Conversations around us stilled. Even the music seemed to soften. The woman blinked, taken aback. Daniel's expression did not change, but there was steel beneath the softness in his eyes. "If you plan to insult someone, he said it should not be the woman who saved my daughter's life on a night when we had nowhere else to go." A murmur rippled through the surrounding guests. I froze because no one had ever spoken about that night in public. No one had ever defended me in front of a crowd before. Daniel continued, his voice unwavering. "And if you are implying she earned her position through anything other than integrity and grit, then you are profoundly mistaken." The woman's cheeks flushed pink. She opened her mouth, but he gently cut her off. "Julie did not climb fast," he said. "I fell, and she is the one who helped me rise again." The words washed over me, removing the last remnants of shame and replacing them with something warm and overwhelming. People were no longer whispering. They were listening, some with raised brows, some with thoughtful frowns, and some with softened eyes that said maybe they had judged too soon. Daniel stepped closer to me, not touching, but near enough that I felt the certainty in his stance. "This company prides itself on excellence," he said. "Let us not forget that character is part of that." He held the woman's gaze for one more silent beat before turning back to me. "You okay?" he asked quietly, barely audible over the soft rustle of the room. I nodded, though my throat was too tight to speak. He gave a small, reassuring smile, the kind meant for me and me alone, and then he turned to address the entire group. "If you want to know the truth," he said, lifting his glass slightly, "Julie Harper is the reason Brennan Foundation exists in its current form. She reminded me of who I wanted to be as a father, as a leader, as a human being." Applause rose slowly, then grew louder. People standing clapping, looking at me not with pity, but with something I had fought my whole life to earn respect. I stood frozen, tears threatening, but I kept them back because this moment was bigger than my fear, bigger than my embarrassment. It was the first time in my life someone had stood beside me proudly, publicly, without hesitation. Lily tugged my hand and whispered, "We love you, Julie." I looked down at her tiny, earnest face, and something inside me broke open in the most beautiful way. When the applause softened, Daniel reached for my hand, not to perform, not to impress, but because he meant it, because it was real. "One night you opened your door," he whispered. "Tonight I open every door that was ever closed to you." Those words settled deep inside me, healing places I did not know were still hurting. The year that followed did not unfold like a fairy tale. It unfolded like real life does, quietly, unevenly, sometimes beautifully, and sometimes with shadows still lingering at the edges. But for the first time in as long as I could remember, the shadows were not the only thing I saw. There was light, too, and more of it as the months passed. I stepped into my new role at the Brennan Foundation, unsure and trembling, the first few weeks convinced someone would eventually tap my shoulder and tell me a mistake had been made, that girls like me did not belong in offices with floor-to-ceiling windows and polished conference rooms. But Daniel never let me walk those halls alone in spirit. He gave me room to grow, without hovering, but he always noticed when I doubted myself and somehow always found the right moment to say something simple that steadied me. "You earned your place." Or Lily asks every morning if she gets to see you today. Or my favorite, on the days I felt small, "The world did not break you, Anna. You are proof it is possible to rise without becoming hard." And slowly I began to believe him. The programs I created for single parents housing insecure employees and caregivers gained traction. People came to my office not for approval, but because they trusted me. They told me stories they had never said aloud, and I wrote policies that protected them because I had once needed protection too. The board took notice. Donations grew, and every time someone thanked me for helping them navigate hardship, I felt something inside me settle like a piece of my life clicking into place at last. But the biggest changes happened outside the office. Daniel healed in a way I had never dared hope he could. Not all at once. Grief does not vanish simply because love returns. Some nights he stood at his kitchen sink staring at a mug he had once shared with his late wife, and I knew better than to fill the silence. Other nights Lily would ask why Mommy had to go to heaven, and Daniel's voice would catch even when his answers were gentle and steady. Healing was not a straight line, but it was a line we walked together side by side, and slowly the house that had once felt like a shrine turned into a home again. I learned where Daniel kept the spices, how he liked his coffee, the way he always burned the first pancake, but insisted he meant to. He learned I talked to myself when I cooked, that I folded dish towels like my mother used to, that I cried at documentaries about rescued animals. And Lily, sweet, bright Lily. She attached herself to me with the fearless certainty only children possess. She drew pictures of the three of us constantly. She insisted on sitting between us on movie nights. She asked me to braid her hair, to read her the same bedtime story over and over, to kiss her forehead before sleep because Daddy says kisses keep nightmares away. One spring morning just after her 6th birthday, she came downstairs wearing a little yellow dress and holding a paper heart. On it she had written, "Mommy number 2. She held it up shyly. "This is you." I had to cover my mouth with both hands to stop from crying too loudly. Daniel saw it from across the room, and something in his face broke and healed in the same breath. Life was not perfect, but it was whole. And then came the anniversary, the day marking exactly 1 year since the night I saw Daniel and Lily under that cracked awning, cold and trembling and invisible to the world. Daniel told me he had a surprise planned. He dressed in a simple slate gray sweater, took Lily's hand in one of his and mine in the other, and drove us to the old neighborhood I used to live in. I recognized the streets immediately. The corner store where my EBT card had once been declined. The bus stop where I had cried with a grocery bag full of generic brand noodles. The laundromat that smelled like soap and hopelessness. And then he stopped the car in front of the sagging awning, the very place I had first seen them. The building had not changed much. The bricks were still chipped, the metal frame still bent. A thrill of emotion surged through me so suddenly I had to grip the car door. "Why are we here?" I whispered. Daniel stepped out without answering, then walked around to open my door, because he always did that without thinking. He led me to the spot where he once stood shivering while holding his daughter to his chest. Lily skipped ahead, not remembering the place but sensing something important. Daniel turned to me, hands in his pockets, face soft but serious. "This was the darkest night of my life," he said quietly. "I had lost everything. And then you opened your door. You saved us. You saved me." I shook my head immediately. "I didn't save anyone. I just made soup and offered a blanket." He stepped closer. "No, you gave us safety. You gave us dignity. You gave us a beginning when I thought I had reached the end." And he reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. My breath caught. He did not kneel. He did not make a spectacle. He simply opened the box between us, revealing a simple ring, not ornate, not flashy, just beautiful and warm and real. "I do not want to be rescued," he said, "and I am not trying to rescue you. I want a life with you. A real one. Ordinary days, burnt pancakes, bedtime stories, all of it. Stay with us. Not because we need saving, because we are finally home." My vision blurred. My heart swelled against my ribs so hard it almost hurt. Lily ran up, clinging to my waist. "Be my mom," she asked in a whisper soft as breath. I cupped her little face in my hands and kissed her forehead. Then I looked at Daniel, at the man who had once been a stranger under a broken awning, at the little girl who had once slept beneath a borrowed blanket in my living room, and I felt something inside me settle with finality. "Yes," I said. "Yes." Daniel pulled me into his arms. Lily wedged happily between us, and the three of us stood there in the place where everything had once been broken. Except now the sun was out. Warm, bright, soft. We stepped forward together, leaving the shadow of the awning behind us and walking straight into the light. If this story made your heart tighten even for a moment, if it reminded you of the nights when you tried to stay strong while the world kept pushing you down, then please do not leave just yet. Stay with me for these last few seconds, because what I am about to say is for people like you, the ones who know what it means to keep going even when your hands are shaking. You watched Anna open her tiny door on a night when she had nothing left to give, and somehow that small act of kindness healed a man who had lost everything and a little girl who was just trying to understand why life can be so cold. If their journey touched you, if you saw yourself in their heartbreak or their hope, then I want to invite you to join us, because this channel is not just a place for stories. It is a place for people who believe in second chances, in quiet strength, in the kind of love that does not shout but holds on when everything else falls apart. And maybe that is why you are still here, because somewhere deep down, you know that the world is still full of people like Anna, people who are trying, people who are hurting, people who are helping, even when no one helps them back. And maybe you have been that person too. Maybe you have carried burdens alone, wiped your own tears, sat in silent rooms, wondering if anyone ever truly saw you. If so, let this story remind you that you are not invisible and you are not alone. You matter. Your kindness matters. Your existence matters more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories that honor people like you, please hit that like button, not for the algorithm, but so that this message reaches someone out there who needs hope tonight, someone who feels forgotten, someone who has prayed for a sign that life can still turn toward the light. And if you subscribe, you are not just subscribing to a channel. You are joining a community of hearts that have been bruised but never broken, a community that understands that sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness, one warm meal, one open door to change everything. And when you share this video, you never know whose life you are touching. It might be a widow eating alone tonight, a single dad trying to be enough, a woman who feels like the world has stopped listening, or someone who just needs to believe that good people still exist. So please, before this video fades away, take a deep breath with me and remember the last image of the story, the three of them stepping out of the cold rain and into the light. Let that be your reminder that no matter where you are in your own journey, no matter how lost, tired, or overlooked you feel, the light is still ahead of you. And if you stay here with us, we will keep walking together until you find it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling, and thank you for being the kind of person who stays until the end. Now click subscribe, and keep your heart open. The next story might be the one that changes everything for you.